want you to imagine it's 2025, 5 years from our global lockdown due to COVID-19. And people now don't have to commute to work every single day, 4 days a week, and only really for in-person communication and meetings, because everyone found out during COVID that your teammates, your underlings, action things better, pay much more attention if it's an in-person meeting versus Zoom. Who can feel that? You guys feel that, right? So 4 days a week now, and prior to COVID-19, your workplace was in an office, multi-story tower, just like this. So often when you'd go to work, you would bump into people getting a coffee that weren't from your workplace. And you would talk about your children, or maybe the kind of project you're working on, or how stressed you are if we're in Singapore. And then while you waited by the elevator, you might learn about how somebody else does business in your field, in your discipline. New conversations with new people. But since COVID-19 and the recession that followed, many businesses downsized, and now your workplace is now in a purpose-built facility only with the people you work with. So your life has become the connections within your household, your family, your existing friends, and your existing colleagues. There's very few brand new interactions. So on this day, you walk into the brand new office and you notice that the hallways have been made extra wide, so there's never a possibility to brush shoulders with anyone. You go up the touchless elevator and into what was an open plan office. You can still see everyone, but they've placed plexiglass sheets inside the ground, so if there's an outbreak, a button can be pressed and these can come up. And no spittle or bodily fluids can ever be shared. So you can still see your team. You make a mental note to buy some plants to make it seem less like a hospital. You go into your one in-person meeting of the day, and although you no longer have to wear masks, you still have to sit 1 meter away from the rest of your colleagues. When the meeting is over, you'd go back to your desk, and as you're typing at the laptop, you think, everything that I can do here today, I can do from my house. So you jump back into the train, and you've moved further out from the city now that you don't have to commute as much. So you go further out, and you get into your house, and you close your eyes, and you relish the silence of your home office, which you soundproofed. You can no longer hear the sounds of the postman dropping the post off, or the footsteps of the neighbor's kids when they run home from school, or even of the dogs barking at the neighbor on the other side. You have effectively blocked out the sound of your tribe. And that tribe is the human tribe. Now that simulation, if you like, was from an article that came out in the BBC at the height of our pandemic. And when I read this article as a human connection specialist, it really worried me, and it's about to really worry you, because I'm going to tell you the science behind human connection. I want to take you all back to the cave that we were speaking about. In our days as early man, we would have safety in these numbers in the cave. So if we were pregnant and slowing down the tribe, the other women, they would gather to feed our family. If we were injured while we were out hunting, the other tribesmen would hunt game and bring it back to feed our family. And when we would sleep at night, people in the tribe would take turns keeping watch for saber-toothed tigers, predators, or foreign tribes. So over time, our brain evolved to be wired for connection. I cannot say it enough to all of you here. We are wired for connection. It's why we are here on the planet, above money, status, all of these things. It is the most important purpose while we're here. And as a slight segue, before I arrived today, I read an article about the sad passing of Tony Shea. Everyone knows here who Tony Shea is, the founder of Zappos. And in his last days, he was more disconnected than ever. He stopped taking calls from people, and he had quite an addictive personality. That's how he became very successful, by devoting his time to his company. But when that company was bought by Amazon, he isolated himself, and without the stimulus of flying all the time that we had prior to COVID, he started indulging in things that were really, really not good for him. And he left us on this planet having not been in touch with a lot of his closest friends for a long time before he passed. So that is just a slight segue into when I say we are wired for connection. Human connection is not some woo-woo thing. It's backed by science. So that means, similar to the example I just gave you with Tony, when we are cast out of the tribe, in those days maybe we got lost. our body would be flooded by stress hormones because our brains were not wired to be disconnected. So norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol would be flooding our bodies. It's a fight or flight response. But those people who experience loneliness over a chronic long period of time actually will suffer from life-shortening diseases. And that's why there are so many studies that people who register loneliness have a shorter lifespan. So this is the science of why I tell you all of this and why a future that looks like that BBC simulation is really, really dangerous for us. So what are the implications of this? So we're cast out of the tribe. We're in this fight or flight response that so many people have been experiencing during COVID. What happens next? Well, anxiety and depression, like I just mentioned, but also social awkwardness. So an article also came out in the New York Times that we will all be socially awkward. These symptoms were oversharing on office place Zooms because you're so thirsty for connection, wanting so badly to be around people, but the minute you're around them, you don't know the right things to say and do, which I recently, even as somebody who's very social experienced at a dinner party, I was out of control, excited as an extrovert to be around people. And the last thing is actually a misreading of social cues on digital. So people were having altercations with people in their circle because they were misreading the social cues on video conference. The same social cues which are subconscious to us when we are in our natural state and I'm meeting you and we make eye contact. We get all of that. And that article sent me back to a time in my life where I was the most disconnected I've ever been. In 2013, I was living in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and I was having the time of my life. I was working for Virgin Radio, my dream job, and I get a phone call one day from my sister. She says, Simone, this is how she talks, Simone, if I was you, I'd want to come home. I jumped on a plane to arrive to see my mother had suffered a severe stroke, a stroke that landed her in a wheelchair. And I knew as the prodigal Asian daughter that had been away for almost 10 years as an expatriate, and my sister had taken care of everything since my father's death in 2004, that it was my turn. Raise your hand here if you know what filial obligation feels like. Yeah. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I quit my job and I moved back to Australia, and I think I was really naive about how much utility I would have. Because you see, once someone's permanently in a wheelchair in Australia, they're considered a two-person carer. That means that at any time, by law, in a nursing home, they need two people to take them from the bed to the bathroom, from the bathroom to the toilet. And so that rendered me, the prodigal daughter, standing there useless. I had one job. So one day I went to the nursing home and I was like, right, today, we've got to partake today. And I knocked on the door of my mum. She was on the bathroom, she was at the toilet, and her beautiful Filipina carers let me in, and I said, please let me help you. But I stopped midway because I was not at all prepared for what I saw. There was my mum standing facing the bathroom towels, her back to me with a shirt on and nappies, her paralyzed leg completely atrophied on one side, and she was kind of tilting back and forth, and one of the carers was propping her up on the weak side. And when we talk about disconnection, disconnection also happens within ourselves. My mother was a tiger, strong. She was a mentor and a teacher at Raffles Girls' School, the most elite girls' school in Singapore. She had authority. And here she was, tilting back and forth like a bird with a broken wing. And my face of horror at seeing this person was just in shock. And my mother caught my face in the bathroom mirror and she said, hello, darling, are you okay? And I wasn't okay, but because I'd been in the media for years, I put on this plastic face and I was like, yeah, mummy, I'm okay. All I needed to do, my one job, was literally one carer would pull the nappy down, pull the commode in, and I just had to pull the wheelchair back to let the commode in. And once that process was done, I sat on the bed in my mother's room and I sobbed. So how did my mother's disconnection with herself lead to mine? And when I tell you stories about Tony Shea today, this is someone who had a purpose and a role in life. This is someone who worked at a company, and when that company was sold, we all have to look at our connection with ourselves, our identity. And so the second punch in the face that happens when people we love become incapacitated is that we, the children, particularly those of us who are Asian, have to take care of all of the stuff that they have accumulated in their lives. And for me, because my father passed away, that was 70 years, 35 years of each of their stuff. And my mother was a hoarder, is a hoarder, I should say. And before you laugh at that, hoarding is screaming out because you're lonely, but with possessions. In 2013, hoarding was actually registered as one of the mental disorders, but of course, this was happening in real time. They were doing that over there at the psychological circles, and I was in real time dealing with it. So we didn't know that this was a thing. I learnt and discovered this through experience. You know, where I once would see a pile of clothes, I now see sculptures of loss. That is what hoarding is. And again, I knew that this is not something that you can outsource. And I'll tell you this because when you clean up your parents' things, you find horrible things that no one else outside of your family should see. You will lose face. I have a friend who found presents that her father wrapped for his mistress. I have a cousin who found letters her mother had written to the Vatican begging for a divorce from her father. This is not something you can outsource, and frankly, my disconnection started because unlike when my father died or people pass away and the tribe, the community gets it, people don't really get the hoarding. It's not something I can say, hey, auntie, please come and help me clean my mother's accumulation of trash. It's not something you can do. And I knew my sister had done enough. So I quit my job on the radio in Australia, and from 9 to 5 p.m. every day for 6 months, I cleaned. And I could literally track my mother's disconnection through things. We had a 9-bedroom family home, and I saw that she literally filled one room with things until she couldn't sleep there anymore. And she pulled out her mattress and moved to the next room and to the next room. You know, like a hermit crab finds a new shell. This is what she'd done. And so this went on for 5 months until I got to the ground zero from where all the disconnection began. My mum and dad's master bedroom, where they had slept side by side for 35 years. And I'm small, you know I'm small. I remember pushing the master bedroom door and looking above my head and seeing the things piled high on top. Again, and it's not the first time I'll say this in this story, I took a deep breath and I was like, Simone, no one else can do this but you. This is the last gift you give your parents. So I started cleaning and I got to work until and I tell you, and you're going to laugh because we all have an auntie like this, but I found every rubber band that my mother had ever gotten from my dad's news agency. My father was a shopkeeper. Magazine after magazine after magazine. And then, most sinister of all, I found towers of tapao, takeaway containers. And we all laugh because we all got an Asian auntie that keeps the takeaway containers. But my mum wasn't domestic. She never cooked. She maybe cooked 5 times for us in our whole childhood. My dad, though, was this incredible Chinese cook. He would make vats of Hokkien mee and then make me go with the tapao containers to our neighbors, our community, and I'd say, this is really lame. My dad made noodles, and give them to our Australian neighbors. That's how we connected with people. And I realized that my mother was keeping those containers for a time that would never come, for grandchildren maybe she thought would appear one day. But that time with my father was gone, and she wouldn't let it go. So I kept cleaning until I got to carpet level. And this is really where I found out that hoarding is linked to disconnection and to a trauma. There were 3 bags. One bag was full of every obituary my father's death had ever been written about in a newspaper, clipping after clipping after clipping. Another plastic bag was full of his x-rays. And the 3rd plastic bag was full of every condolence card she had ever gotten on his death. And I remember sitting on the carpet and thinking, from the day he died, April 6th, 2004, this poor woman stopped throwing anything away. When they say empty nest syndrome, it's more than that, you know, it's like filling the loneliness with stuff. And in preparation for today, I did call my mum, And she has really severe dementia now, so it's kind of hard my assistant Grace actually heard the conversation. And finally I said to her, what was it like, Mum, after Tamara, I left for Dubai and Tamara and I grew up? And she said, it was like my world crumbled. And she told us that she started shopping because if she went out shopping, she could have a dialogue. Remember I told you about that oversharing? We'll all be socially awkward. That oversharing, that was it. So there was one final place inside the bedroom that was very challenging for me. It was the bathtub. It had long been clogged with dark standing water and shopping receipts on top. And I remember, again, taking the deep breath and going, this is the last gift you give your parents. No one else was going to do this but you. And so I slapped on the rubber glove, plunged my hand into the water to take the plug out. And that is a moment I will never forget, because every time I do dishes now, I remember this moment and I'm taken back. That is the moment that I disconnected from me. And I had realized that just 6 months before, I had been a creative. Many of you here might be creatives. I had been creating shows and programs and writing dialogues and social media campaigns. And I was now a full-time cleaner. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's good, honest work. But it wasn't what I specialized in. It's not what I trained for. I still do very greasy glasswork to this day, guys. It's not what I'm good at. So in that moment, I forgot who I was. And when we don't have self-connection with ourselves, it is almost impossible to have great connection with other members of the tribe. So that is the story of my disconnection, and I tell it to you because if it can happen to me, one of the most social people you'll ever meet, it can happen to absolutely anyone. And how it actually starts is by statements you tell yourself to isolate yourself. I told myself there was no other 30-year-old with a father in the grave and a mother in a wheelchair, which was absolutely not true. But I used that to keep myself from going out. And just like that New York Times article, if I went to buy a loaf of bread, I would tell the lady at the bakery my whole life story. I was that thirsty for connection. So these are the implications of the post-pandemic world. How do we solve this? What are the solutions I think are really important to look at? Firstly, if we're in a future, well, we're in it right now, but there will be a future where we're circulating amongst our existing connections, people in our workplace, people in our own home, our own existing friends, we have to connect more authentically. And we do that through disclosure. Now, I don't mean telling your whole life story like I just have. Remember that true vulnerability, as Brené Brown says, it has to be earned. It's by people who deserve to hear it. So amongst your existing friends, not strangers at the bakery, share more deeply, talk about deeper things. And I, particularly for the men here, I look at my partner a lot, and male dialogue is very much like, guys can be friends for years, and then you'll be like, what's his wife's surname? No idea, right? Like 20 years of friendship. So please, I challenge you to connect more deeply. The second thing is, we get dopamine, the reward hormone, every time we do something pleasurable. Eat chocolate, make connections. So I want you, where you can, to make new connections with people. They could be your barista. They could be the guy that was just carrying the monitor who wanted someone to let him down the lift that I just helped him with. He's getting a dopamine hit when he is seen by you as a member of the tribe. You're getting a dopamine hit too. So I have an old uncle who lives opposite me. I just moved to Juchiat, and he is in a house that the second level balcony is parallel with my bedroom windows. He is the most nosy, fantastic uncle in a white wife beater singlet, you know the one I'm talking about, that you'll ever meet. And so when we first moved in, I was like, Uncle Lamb is trying to see if we are breaking COVID rules. Why else would you be so interested in the two foreigners opposite you, right? And once I started acknowledging him, and my partner told me his name, I'd be like, hi, Uncle Lamb, hi, Uncle Lamb, hi, Uncle Lamb. And then when we both got dengue, yes, I had dengue, we both had dengue, we walked across the road just to let Uncle Lamb know, hey, Uncle Lamb, I know you're in the white singlet, but you could get bitten. Uncle Lamb was like, I live here 20 years, I never got bitten, right? But finally, the other day, Uncle Lamb crossed the road. I mean, for an 85-year-old Chinese man who is culturally my senior to cross the road, he came over, and this is how I know this is truly Asian love. He's like, you know your aircon pipe is out. The other day I pushed it back for you. And then he says, you better fix it or you have to pay for it. And then my partner, not being Asian, says, I won't fix it. The landlord will pay for it. And I was like, that was Uncle Lamb getting his dopamine hit. That was him making the connection. But these are those little things that we can still do while socially distant that give both people the connection that we are wired to need by the science. The other thing is as well, remember I mentioned the huge wide hallways where we're not brushing? Now, oxytocin is the social bonding hormone we get from touch. So within your homes, if you are not huggers, hug your children more, hold your partner's hand, you're going to need that. Bump that up. The other thing that I wanted to say was reach out to people in your circle. So in April this year, almost on the same date that my father passed away, my mentor from radio in Dubai took his own life while repatriating back to Australia and in quarantine. If people are really close to the edge, we're seeing victims of the real pandemic born of COVID-19, which is an epidemic of loneliness. So people are on the edge. I want you to look through and look at your connections, open up your phone, scroll, who haven't I spoke to for a while? And reach out to them. And I'm going to go into a way in a second that I'd love you to reach out. But firstly, the last point of the solutions I want to list is, if anything that I've said to you today has triggered you or made you feel anything, please feel free to connect with me. I'm on every social media possible. And I can send you the email of someone who's incredible, very discreetly, that you can talk to. The final thing that I would love for all of us to do to give that connection, receive that connection, is go through your phone, find those people that you haven't spoke to for a while, and this is the game of connection we play. I want you to start off with a text. If they respond with a text, I want you to escalate to a voice note, which is more emotional information. If they respond with a voice note, I want you to up your game to video call. And finally, when we can all meet, and even if we can in our market, we're okay, but obviously in Europe, they're in second lockdown, make time to meet them in person, face to face. Every great digital connection we make, the idea is that it leads us closer to in-person connection. And why I ask you to make that gradual ping pong of reciprocity with the reaching out is people who are already in that position I was back in 2014. We're not ready to go from text to phone call. We're not ready. We want text, and then text will ease us into it, okay? So those are my tips to help combat what's happening. I hope today I've shown you a little bit of the science, but also really made you feel connected with me, and we've actually had a bit of that dopamine together right now. I mean, even looking into in-person people's eyes, it just gives me a thrill. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Simone Heng.